When people come to a traditional church service, perhaps for the first time, they're struck by the difference between church and other public gatherings they might attend. And that's deliberate. It's meant to be so. Otherwise, traditional church wouldn't have the power to change our lives. Hi, I'm Warren, parish priest here at St Columba's. Glad you could join me for my message of the day. When you come to church, to a traditional church like St Columba's, which you can see inside the church behind me, you're struck, even if not consciously, unconsciously, by the architecture, the layout of the church. It's full of symbols. You can see, for instance, the stained glass windows behind me. We use written word, spoken word, prayer, art, music, singing, music, I've already said music, scripture, deliberate silence. We use all our five senses, including our sixth sense of something else going on below the surface. Take, for instance, the layout of the church, and you might not sort of think of this when you come to church, but depending on the layout of the church, it says something about our relationship to God. For instance, if you come to a traditional service where the priest would have their back to the people, everyone's sort of looking out that way. It's sort of the idea, that the dominant metaphor, if you like, for God and our relationship to God is one of God's otherness. I suppose you could say transcendence. Whereas if you came to the 9:30 service here at St Columba's on a Sunday morning, you'll find the priest facing the people, whereas God is around amongst us, in the midst of us. Now, we might not consciously think of that, but that's at play when we do this. The beautiful architecture, the beauty of the stained glass windows, the colours that are chosen, all of these things impress upon us, as does the spoken word, the written word, facial expressions, gestures. All these things are part of the experience of coming to a traditional church. And a traditional church service has its own rhythm. It shifts and changes in tempo. It has a climactic point often, although it might be harder to see, and I might have another Tuesday talk about that. It weaves spoken word, written word, song, symbol, eating and drinking together at the Eucharist. It weaves all of this into a unit of, say, around 1 hour. So it's quite an intense experience in a way. Perhaps not intense, but a full experience. And while some of it is deliberately repeated week after week, some of the words we say are the same, there is always a great deal that changes. The stuff that we have that's the same week after week, the point of that is so that it can get from our head. We don't have to think about it all the time, think, well, what does that mean? It can go from our head to our heart. But we have other stuff in there that actually engages our intellect, so you've got to think about it. And at the Eucharist, the liturgy, and that's what the service is called, we use the word liturgy, it's structured to lead our heart and our mind to the point, the climax, if you like, where we acknowledge the self-offering of Christ for us, and then come and eat and drink together to receive that spiritual food of self-offering. But everything we've done has led to that point, to bring us to that point, with head and heart, and then with our bodies to come forward. It's a very rich experience. Now, if you don't find it rich, it's possible it's because we're not used to, or we might be more used to a plain diet. A traditional liturgy, as I am describing it, beckons us to go deeper in our lives. But this takes time, consistency, regularity. The liturgy does not try to crush whatever it is that we are feeling. So we might come feeling, I don't really know what to do with this. How do I participate? It doesn't want to crush that at all. It wants us to feel that, but it's leading us somewhere. You've got to participate in the liturgy, despite whatever you're feeling, through whatever you're feeling. So whatever we feel, it might be the worries of life, it might be boredom, it might be confusion. We're invited to bring them into the liturgy itself, to let these feelings and thoughts bump up next to the architecture next to the spoken word, the written word, the music, the singing, the silence, the eating and drinking together, and the prayer, all these things, to let everything that we are be taken into this great movement, which is so rich, which is moulding us. You could say what we're invited to do when we come to the liturgy is to bring everything we are, not to deny it, not to forsake it, not to crush it, not to ignore it, but to let everything we are flow into the liturgy, and all those elements that I've been talking about, the great symbols, etc., the spoken word, the written word, that all of that start to mould us, to compress us, to expand us into the human beings that are made for Christ. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.